The story begins in the year 1306, soon after the events of Braveheart. We are introduced to Robert the Bruce, portrayed by Angus MacFadyen. After William Wallace's death, Robert the Bruce aims to take the Scottish crown by forging a pact with John Comyn. They agree to meet on sacred territory for a parley, but the country is in disarray as a result of the failed revolt, and there is little trust among the tribes. Robert asks Comyn about abandoning England and wanting to retain the estates once he is anointed king. Comyn accuses Bruce of pretending to be a saint, citing their shared history of deception. Despite their prior deception, they pursue their intentions, laying the groundwork for a power war in medieval Scotland. Robert Bruce and Comyn had a heated dispute over previous events and their respective visions of history. Bruce had a tragic meeting with John Comyn at Greyfriars Church. The tension between the two men rises, and in an unexpected turn of events, Robert the Bruce kills Comyn. This act of aggression inside hallowed walls is a watershed moment for Robert, cementing his determination to fight for Scottish independence. They talk about their intentions to take back Scotland and Robert the Bruce's desire to recover his fortress. They express their desire for home and family, yet remain resolved to battle the English. Robert promises to capture the king, James, rather than murder him, since there is a prize on his head. Despite the tiredness and lack of fight on the faces of people around him, Robert refuses to give up, certain that they are fighting for the greater good. James Douglas and his troops talk about their pursuit of Robert the Bruce, who had avoided them in battle. They disagree on the significance of the award, with Douglas professing his commitment to his nation and remorse for not like Bruce. Regardless, they continue their pursuit. During a conflict, they encounter Hamish, who is armed but unable to fight properly. Douglas tells his men to spare Hamish, but he discloses their intentions to kidnap Bruce, forcing Douglas to question his devotion. The scenario concludes with Douglas asking for blessings and urging his soldiers to persevere. Despite being excommunicated by the Holy Church, Robert the Bruce is shown in the film as a committed communicator with the Scottish people. After losing his family, including his wife Elizabeth and daughter Marjorie, Bruce takes up the responsibility of fighting for Scotland's independence against the English army and the rebellious clans. For years, he suffers several losses but continues to battle until the rivers flow crimson with Scottish blood. A reward is set on his head, paying 50 gold pieces for his capture. Despite his near-death state, Bruce intends to create another army and continue the struggle for independence. The speaker in the movie describes a first-hand experience with Bruce in the forest and discusses the continuing conflict. The video concludes with the speaker stating that Bruce is still battling the Bruce, but he eventually meets his doom. An ordinary clan youngster and his party leave a Scottish hamlet after expressing their thanks for meals. However, they are halted by the sheriff and his soldiers, who have been tracking Robert the Bruce. The sheriff tells them that Bruce was wounded during a skirmish and is offering a hefty reward for his arrest. Despite their initial reservations, the clan members agree to assist the sheriff in finding Bruce, hoping to participate in the prize. The scenario concludes with the gang going off to find the wounded Scottish hero. Robert the Bruce, wounded and on the run, is contacted by a gang of men who promise him riches in return for his arrest. The guys want to retain the prize for themselves and warn Robert that if anybody discovers their plot, they will suffer serious repercussions. Robert, resolved to battle for his independence and revenge the deaths of his loved ones, declines their offer and sets out to locate King Edward, whom he blames for the atrocities against his people. The guys depart to look for Robert's location as he heals from his injuries and gets help from his pals. A character called Carney meets troops who were previously terrified by him. He describes how he drove them away to defend his town. Carney then explains a damaged sword belonging to a noble and proposes that the protagonist, Robert, restore it to demonstrate his abilities and maybe gain the noble's favor. Carney also cites his sister-in-law and her love of music, hinting that she has murdered men and is unafraid of strangers. Carney urges Robert to join him, offering safety and warmth in the village, but Robert declines because he is waiting for a chance to bring Connie, who is of age, back to the village with him. Robert, now an accomplished blacksmith, is teaching his apprentice when a lady named Brenda enters and demands the sale of gold. Robert rejects and discovers she is from France. A fierce altercation follows, forcing Robert to battle for his entrance. After a lengthy absence, Robert returns to find his son grown and hears from him that Robert's companion, Scott, had a dream in which Robert was on the battlefield alongside Robert the Bruce. Robert shows surprise, but is affected by the recollection of their relationship. The men celebrate the victory, but Robert, the protagonist, is worried by the possibility that his Scott may die. He considers his son's impending maturation and the uncertainty of the future. As the music builds, Robert reflects on the intricacies of life, such as the desire for justice and the tough choices that must be made. Amidst the tumult of combat, Robert is unclear if his adversary, the king, is still alive, and he debates whether to intervene or let the event play out. The tension rises as Robert grapples with his allegiance and the repercussions of his actions. The protagonists are in a hazardous predicament as they confront the guy who has placed their lives in risk. They consider assassinating their own king, Robert the Bruce, to safeguard themselves and their riches. However, they finally determine that it is their responsibility to assist him, regardless of the dangers. The scenario grows violent as they prepare to ambush Bruce, with youngsters assisting in holding him down throughout the battle. The characters have lost loved ones and hold grudges against their enemies, the Bruce. The war is coming, and they are determined to safeguard all they have left. A witch informs Robert the Bruce that he is not welcome, and that his heart belongs to his brother. She teases him about his previous relationship and gives him cannabis. Robert says that he would do the same, and that no one will believe the falsehoods she tells about him. The witch threatens to forever silence him before singing about the English loss and the necessity to erase the king's joy, lost souls, and the voyage as a whole. She identifies as Spider and reiterates the necessity to spin the soul's journey, undoing the king's joy and the song of justice. The protagonist, Robert, prepares for conflict and inspires his allies to defend their loved ones, even if it means fighting. He takes leadership and issues commands, aware that the stakes are high and lives may be lost. Robert's nephew and niece are there, and he remembers his brothers who joined the uprising against King Robert. One of them, Togue, sobbed before fleeing. Regardless of the emotional toll, Robert encourages his family to be strong and unified. Robert the Bruce meets an archer called Maoki, who tells tales of Bruce's late father. Maoki tells that Bruce's mother died during delivery, but his father was a nice guy and great fighter. Despite losing his clan's territory, Maoki hopes Bruce will persevere and fight for their independence. Bruce's father had remained behind to command the clan's police force, and when he was wounded in combat, he implored the clan to keep fighting for Bruce. Bruce's father died of his wounds, but before he died, he handed his weapons to be sharpened for the impending conflict. The youngsters were told to prepare for the war by laying traps in the river before the snow melted. Scott and Robert had a heated dispute while setting deer traps. Robert persists on assisting his uncle despite being barred from hunting, arguing that they should not allow a man die who had caused their father's deaths. Scott queries why they need to set traps when they already have venison stocked. Robert then expresses his conviction that being a good soldier means being a good brother, friend, and son. In the meanwhile, he urges Scott to be a good kid and man, and he gives him his own knife to help his mother peel potatoes. The chat concludes with Robert acknowledging Scott's desire for vengeance while encouraging him to concentrate on being a good soldier and fighting the good battle. Robert Bruce, the Scottish monarch, thinks on his previous fights and laments sending away his army at a critical juncture in the conflict. He thinks that God appointed him to be king, but their defeat in war has made him doubt his worthiness. In a dream, he imagined himself as a free monarch, accompanied by his son. Bruce is now recuperating from injuries and is being looked after by a dedicated servant. He confesses his wish to live in a castle and considers the fact that the land belongs to no one. Robert Bruce and the blacksmith talk about his sword, which was handed to him by his uncle to be mended. The blacksmith retains the sword, thinking it belongs to the king, but Robert pushes him to return it to his uncle in the sake of peace. Despite the sacrifices he incurred for Scotland, Robert appreciates peace and encourages his servant to uphold it. Robert Bruce, the Scottish monarch, refuses to forsake his son in the midst of battle. He expresses a wish to escape with his family while acknowledging the significance of their men dying for a cause. Bruce's wife, Bianca, is declared queen of the forests and glens, and when she dies, Bruce takes the kingdom. Amidst the commotion, Bruce's advisor chastises him for exhibiting weakness at a critical juncture in the conflict. Bruce is told to remain calm and focused on the work at hand. Robert's troops talk about their objective to discover and destroy the enemy. One of them says he saw a sign suggesting their target is at their brother's croft. They proclaim their resolve to destroy their foes while acknowledging that they are also men. A guy approaches them and offers assistance on their trip, but they are told to say nothing and accept it. Robert's soldiers continue their trek, encountering difficulties along the road, including a shortage of food and shelter. They weigh the relevance of their mission and the need of wielding their swords, as well as the human cost of violence. Robert Bruce gives an impassioned address to his warriors, motivating them to fight for Scotland's independence. He reminds them of the country's dread, wrath, and potential, and motivates them to sacrifice their lives for its release. Bruce also accepts the grim realities of battle, including the prospect of death. Despite this, He feels the cause is worth fighting for and rallies his men with fresh zeal. The scenario also depicts moments of friendship and combat preparedness, as the soldiers practice and share supplies. The title figure, portrayed by Angus MacFadyen, returns to his town after a lengthy absence. He aims to return Connie, who he hopes to marry. Robert expresses amazement at Yoki, a former buddy who is now a farmer, and tells him that he would be welcomed back to the community. Robert also tells Yoki that he has things to do before they depart and begs her to wait. Robert meets a guy at his brother's home and offers to take him and Yoki as wives, but Yoki insists on protecting the man and thinking about the children. Robert declares himself king and instructs the men to put down their weapons, assuring them that they would not be harmed. The image portrays an intense conflict between Robert the Bruce and his adversaries. The music rises as the two sides meet, with Bruce ready to fight despite being outnumbered. His opponents mock and persuade him to quit up, but Bruce stays steadfast, expressing his dedication to the cause. The scenario concludes with Bruce emerging triumphant, forcing his adversaries to withdraw. Throughout the struggle, the music heightens suspense and highlights the severity of the situation. Robert, who had been hiding in the wilderness, is found by Angus of the MacDonald clan. Angus and his clan greet Robert as a rescued life and provide him refuge and safety. James Douglas also appears, and they all talk about their willingness to fight for their independence against England. Robert is recognized as their king, and the clans are encouraged to rise anew and reclaim their freedom. The sequence concludes with applause. As he thinks on his time with nature and his late father, the main character conveys his great connection to both. He sees their likenesses in the early mist, the river, and his dreams. The guy remembers the day he departed to fight for his nation and the freedom everyone desired. Through the purity of his recollections, he learns to accept the call to action and fight for their cause.